Welcome to Alien Eve. New sci-fi stories arrive every 4 hours. If you want these journeys to continue, your support means everything. For long listening sessions, check out the playlist and enjoy the universe.
The Hall of Ascendance was the kind of place designed to remind visitors they were very, very small. Its ceiling arched high above like the ribcage of some ancient celestial titan, lit by rivers of soft violet light flowing through crystalline veins. Murmured echoes drifted between the towering statues of past rulers, each one carved with impossible precision, each one radiating presence even in stillness. Human envoy Daniel Reeve tried to keep his breathing steady as he followed the ceremonial escort down the central walkway. He'd been in intimidating rooms before, but this was different. This one watched him back. At the far end of the hall, the Empress waited. Elvira Keith, last descendant of the Sapphire bloodline, ruler of the Selarynth Dominion, conqueror of 4-star systems, and according to the diplomatic briefings, a being whose tolerance for incompetence was a measured geological value. Near zero, she sat upon her throne of interlocking prismatic shards, the structure glowing softly beneath her. Her long, tapered ears flicked at the slightest shifts of sound. Blue-silver bioluminescent patterns drifted across her crimson skin, not randomly, but in flowing emotional syntax Daniel had only trained for 2 weeks to interpret. He understood none of it. "Envoy Daniel Reeve of Earth," announced the herald, his voice echoing like a struck bell. "Bearer of humanity's gratitude for the Selarynth defense of the Delta Rim." Daniel bowed deeply, hoping he didn't look as terrified as he felt. When he rose, the Empress was studying him, not the way a ruler studies a diplomat, but like she was examining something unexpected, something out of place. Her golden irises glimmered with sharp intelligence. "You are not the envoy originally assigned," she said. Her voice was velvet wrapped around a blade. "No, your radiance," Daniel admitted. "Envoy Harridan fell ill on the journey." Ill was a generous term. Harridan had eaten unfamiliar station food and was currently promising to resign from diplomacy forever. "So they sent you." There was no mockery in her tone, just observation. "A lower-ranked representative. Human willingness to improvise continues to amuse me." Daniel decided not to ask whether that was meant as an insult. The Empress leaned forward slightly. The bioluminescent patterns along her cheekbones shifted into a slow ripple, interest. Curiosity, or preparation to order his immediate vaporization. Hard to tell. "You arrive at a fortuitous moment, Daniel Reeve of Earth. In light of our joint victory against the Vascari incursion, I have chosen to grant each allied species a single boon, anything within my power to provide." Daniel blinked. A boon? Now, nobody had warned him he'd be making species-wide decisions. The Empress's voice lowered. "Your predecessors from other empires asked for predictable things: territory, trade monopolies, ship designs." A faint wry curl touched her lips. "Some asked for immortality. I granted none of those." Daniel swallowed. "May I ask what you did grant?" "What I judged wise," she said simply. "Now it is humanity's turn. Speak your desire." The room fell silent. Daniel's tablet vibrated in his pocket, repeatedly. Urgent messages, instructions from home, probably things like, "Secure quantum lattice engine blueprints immediately or lose your job forever." He didn't reach for it. Instead, he remembered the platform ride from the docking bay earlier that morning. The guide had mistakenly taken them through the lower wards of the capital. There, Daniel had seen something he couldn't forget. Children studying on cracked stone steps because their classroom roof had collapsed. Civilians lining up outside a clinic where only one exhausted medic tended dozens. Infrastructure so strained it looked ready to crumble under its own weight. It hadn't matched the grandeur of the Dominion's reputation, not even close. "Your Radiance," Daniel began, pulse hammering. The Empress's gaze sharpened. "Choose wisely, human." He took a breath. "I wish." His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "I wish for you to direct the resources you had intended for humanity, not to us, but to your own lower wards. To rebuild their clinics, their learning halls, their shelters. To give them what they deserve." Silence detonated across the hall. Every advisor froze. The glowing patterns along the Empress's skin flickered in rapid shock. Daniel forced himself to continue. "Your people stood with ours against the Vascari. They paid a price. I saw the districts where your citizens live, what they're lacking. If you were willing to honor us, then honor them." The hall felt suddenly too big, too cold. The Empress stood. She descended the throne steps slowly, each movement measured, predatory, impossible to read. Daniel's legs wanted to back away. He didn't. When she reached him, her voice was so soft it almost wasn't real. "You ask nothing for your own kind. I ask what's right," he whispered. "If we benefited while they continued to suffer, it wouldn't sit with me. Not now, not ever." The Empress's ears tilted upward, a sign the briefing had labeled stunned disbelief. Then her patterns shifted, slowly, warming. "What curious creatures you humans are," she murmured. Daniel had expected the journey back to Earth to feel long. He hadn't expected it to feel like exile. He spent most of the return trip ignoring the incoming messages, first confused, then furious, then scathing, from Earth's diplomatic command. Words like unacceptable, catastrophic, negligence, and career-ending appeared frequently. He couldn't blame them. He walked into the most important diplomatic moment of his life and asked for improvements to alien schools and clinics. No trade agreements, no tech transfers, no defense pacts, just compassion. The one currency nobody had wanted him to spend. When the transport docked at the orbital diplomatic ring, Daniel didn't even get a full hour before being summoned. The meeting was swift, brutal, and unsurprising. He was reassigned to clerical duty, visa processing for Mars colonies. No hearings, no negotiations, no real responsibilities. It was punishment wearing the polite clothing of bureaucracy. His colleagues avoided meeting his eyes. Some offered sympathetic smiles he hated even more. Others whispered that he'd frozen under pressure, that he'd embarrassed humanity, that he'd thrown away a generational opportunity. The only thing worse than being hated was being pitied. Yet at night in the cramped Mars colony housing, Daniel kept remembering the children studying on cracked steps, the medic's trembling hands, the Empress's unreadable eyes when he spoke his wish. He knew he'd make the same choice again. Maybe that was what frightened him most. Weeks passed, then months. Every day was the same: stamp applications, check travel records, repeat. Pretend to be fine. Then one morning everything changed. A message arrived in his inbox, not from Earth's diplomatic corps, not from Mars administration. It was encoded in Selarynth diplomatic cipher he'd trained with months ago. Priority transmission, from the Empyrean Palace of Empress Elvara Kaeth. For human envoy Daniel Reeve. His hands trembled as he opened it. The message was brief. "You are requested to return to Selarynth Prime at once, as representative of Earth." Elvara Keith requested not humanity, not Earth's delegation. Him. Daniel reread it 7 times. Half the Mars office gathered behind him, pretending not to look. Even the administrator, usually an unmovable bureaucratic mountain, leaned closer. "What in the suns did you do?" he whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't know. The diplomatic transport sent for him was not subtle. It wasn't even modest. It was a Selarynth royal courier, sleek, obsidian, and escorted by 2 gleaming wingships whose hulls shimmered in layered blues. People stared as it docked. Cameras flashed. Officials scrambled to find explanations. Daniel boarded in a daze. No escort detained him. No reprimands, no warnings. Just a single elegantly scripted message awaiting him on a display. "You will be received with full honors upon arrival." He spent the journey pacing, rehearsing possible scenarios. Had the Empress changed her mind? Did she want to confront him? Had his wish caused political chaos? Was this some elaborate Selarynth cultural punishment? None of his theories survived the landing. Selarynth Prime looked different. As the courier descended toward the capital, Daniel pressed his forehead to the viewport in disbelief. The lower wards, once dim, sagging, exhausted, were lit with construction arrays. Newly built schools gleamed between renovated housing blocks. Transit systems ran smoothly. Clinics expanded into multi-level care hubs. Public gardens had replaced cracked lots. He recognized the school steps from before, except now they were part of a modern learning complex filled with laughing, uniformed children. His throat tightened. He'd asked for this. And she'd actually done it. When he stepped off the courier, a Selarynth official approached, older, decorated, unmistakably respected. "Ambassador Reeve," the official said with a deep bow. Daniel blinked. "Ambassador." "I'm not." "You are," she interrupted calmly. "By decree of the Empress, she insisted Earth formally accept your title before your arrival." "Why?" The official offered a small, knowing smile. "You'll see." The palace was just as awe-inspiring as his first visit, but now something was different. It wasn't the guards standing straighter, or the advisors watching him with open curiosity, or the whispers following him through crystalline corridors. It was the Empress. She waited in the garden overlook where he had made his choice months ago. The same place where he'd seen her world struggling under the weight of its own empire. Her back was to him as she looked out over the city. Sunset light caught the bioluminescent patterns on her skin, making them glow like drifting constellations. "Daniel Reeve," she said without turning. Her voice was softer than he remembered. "You returned." Your radiance, I don't understand. Why summon me?" The Empress slowly faced him. Her patterns shifted into warm amber and deep blue, an emotional blend he didn't recognize, but it wasn't anger. Not even close. "You made a wish that no ruler in 500 cycles has ever been offered," she said. "You asked for nothing, and in doing so, you forced me to see truths I had long ignored." Daniel swallowed, unsure what to say. "I redirected resources as you requested," she continued. "I rebuilt the lower wards, improved the clinics, restored the learning halls, and something unexpected happened." She stepped closer. "My people began to trust me again." Daniel's chest tightened. "Your choice changed my empire, Daniel Reeve." He met her gaze, unable to look away. "I didn't intend to." "You did intend it. You simply did not expect the consequences." Her voice warmed. "That is why I requested you specifically." "Requested me for what exactly?" The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke with quiet certainty. "For partnership, for guidance. For a perspective I did not know I needed until you provided it." She tilted her head, golden eyes holding his. "For the first time in centuries, I have chosen to appoint a personal human advisor, and I want that advisor to be you." Daniel felt the world tilt beneath him. "Me, but You are the only human who saw my people as more than political pieces. The only one who chose compassion over advantage. I value that far more than ambition." She stepped even closer, only a hand's width between them now. "And," she added softly, "I find myself curious about you." Her patterns brightened subtly, an intimate glow that made Daniel's pulse stumble. He wasn't sure if she realized how close she stood. He wasn't sure he cared. "Will you accept?" she asked. Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything he'd lost and everything this might. Daniel wasn't sure what he expected from his first day as the Empress's appointed human advisor. Stern interrogations, political testing, maybe ceremonial pressure to prove he wasn't an accident of fate. He did not expect to be led deep into a quiet wing of the palace far away from the throne room, past towering crystalline pillars and soft floating lights that dimmed as they approached. "This section isn't in the diplomatic archives," Daniel said, glancing around. "It would not be," the Empress replied. Her tone was not cold, merely honest. "Few outside my bloodline are permitted here. And yet you're bringing me." A faint ripple of soft amber brushed across her cheekbones. "You are permitted." The corridor opened into a vast atrium filled with gently drifting holographic shards, memories, projected as shifting light. Scenes from centuries ago flickered and faded. Coronations, starship launches, treaty signings. But others showed darker moments, riots, burned districts, starving families. Daniel slowed, struck by the contrast. "These are historical records?" he asked. "More than that," she said. "This is the archive of sovereignty. Every empress of the Sapphire bloodline has contributed memories here, proof of what was achieved and what was neglected." She glided toward a cluster of images depicting neglected slums, collapsing infrastructure, children pressed into overcrowded halls. Daniel's breath caught. The scenes mirrored what he'd seen months ago. The Empress watched the projection silently. "For 3 centuries," she said, "my predecessors recorded these images with the intention to address them. After the next conflict," they said, "after the next border expansion, after the empire stabilizes, always later, never now." Her ears lowered, an expression Daniel had learned meant shame. "When you voiced your wish, Daniel, you forced me to stand in this room and confront what I inherited, what I allowed to continue." Daniel looked at her, unsure whether to speak, but she turned toward him, her gaze unwavering. "You saw what my court refused to show me. You said what my advisors feared to voice." A soft exhale left her. "I do not grant positions in my council lightly, and never before to an offworlder." "That's why I don't understand," Daniel said gently. "I didn't come here to reshape your empire, I just reacted." "To suffering," she finished. "Most beings react to opportunity. You reacted to suffering." Her eyes lingered on him in a way that felt too direct, too unguarded for a ruler. "I find myself wanting to watch how you think, how you choose." Daniel's pulse tightened. That sounded almost personal. He looked back at the swirling holographic memories, victories, failures, burdens centuries old. "You've done more in 6 months than most governments manage in decades," Daniel said quietly. "Maybe you needed someone outside the system to hold up a mirror." Instead of bristling, her patterns glowed with a slow, deep gold. "A mirror," she repeated. "Yes, I believe that is precisely what you have become." The atrium darkened slightly as the projection shifted. A new image appeared of the rebuilt lower districts, clinics gleaming with new equipment, children learning in bright halls. The Empress stepped closer to the image, her voice dropping. When these renovations began, some nobles protested. They claimed I was wasting resources meant for territorial expansion. They doubted the decision. She paused, then added softly, "Now those same nobles bring me letters from grateful citizens. They ask why such improvements were not pursued sooner." Daniel exhaled, stunned. "It's working," he murmured. "It is healing," she corrected. She looked at him, really looked, and Daniel felt heat climb his neck. Her gaze held curiosity, but something else too, something warmer. "Walk with me," she said. They left the archive and moved through a long, windowed corridor overlooking the capital. Below them, lights shimmered across the city, old structures reborn with new energy, new color. Daniel slowed, noticing small shapes gathering near one of the learning halls. Children. The Empress followed his gaze. "They have begun calling it the Reeve Initiative," she said. Daniel froze. "What?" "A somewhat dramatic naming tradition of my people," she said lightly. "They associate shifts in public welfare with the individual who catalyzed them. You wished for their improvement. You will be tied to it now." He exhaled in disbelief. "I'm honored but also terrified." "That is an appropriate emotional response," she said, her expression softened by subtle amusement. Daniel couldn't help smiling back. The Empress stopped suddenly at a balcony. The two guards at its entrance bowed and stepped away, leaving them alone. Night breeze drifted in, brushing against Daniel's face. Elvira turned toward the horizon. "We did not defeat the Vascari because we were stronger," she said. "We won because their command ignored their own civilians' unrest while we strengthened ours. Power is not in the fleet, but in the people who believe in the one who leads them." Daniel leaned on the railing beside her. "I think leadership is easier when someone reminds you who it's for." Her golden eyes shifted toward him, closer than he expected. "And you believe that someone is you?" "I believe I got lucky," he said, "and I believe I'm still terrified every minute I'm here." Her patterns shifted into a warm, swirling amber. "Good. Fear indicates awareness of responsibility." She paused, then added in a tone softer than anything he'd heard from her. "And I value your presence, Daniel Reeve, more than you realize." His breath caught. Her honesty, her proximity, the faint bioluminescent glow brushing the edges of her jaw, none of it felt purely formal. He didn't step back and she didn't move away. The silence between them wasn't political, it wasn't strategic, it was something delicate, unexpected, a moment neither of them seemed ready to name. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "you will join my high council. They will test you, some will resent you, one will openly challenge you." Daniel nodded. "I figured. But tonight," her eyes softened, "tonight you will walk this city with me, not as ruler and advisor, but as two beings who changed each other's path." Daniel's heart thudded. The city at night was alive in ways Daniel had never witnessed on his first visit. The lower wards, once dim, cracked, burdened, now pulsed with renewed energy. Neon lanterns glowed along walkways restored with smooth, polished stone. Market stalls hummed with chatter. Families filled the communal plazas. And everywhere he looked, Daniel saw the same quiet miracle. People were no longer surviving. They were living. The Empress moved beside him without escort, wrapped not in royal armor, but in a sleek dark coat that disguised her silhouette just enough to blend with the night crowds. Her bioluminescent facial patterns remained dimmed, likely an intentional suppression. Even so, Daniel felt eyes drifting toward her as they passed, not in recognition but drawn by some instinctual pull. She radiated presence. Authority, gravity, and now warmth. "Your people don't seem afraid of you," Daniel said gently as they passed a group of Selarynth children playing with floating light spheres. "They fear the uniform," she replied. "The crown, the throne." A pause. "They do not fear the woman." Daniel looked at her profile, sharp, regal, illuminated by drifting neon. "And which one are you right now?" Her ear twitched. "Tonight, only the woman." The admission struck him deeper than he expected. They approached a bustling plaza illuminated by hovering crystalline columns that emitted soft blue ambience. Vendors displayed handmade crafts and local delicacies. A young Selarynth girl, barely waist-high, darted toward them with a glowing fruit sphere cupped in her hands. "For you," she chirped. Daniel blinked. "For me." The girl nodded, ears perked in excitement. "Mama says you're the human who fixed our school, the Reeve human." He felt the heat rise in his face. Before he could speak, the Empress knelt gracefully, bringing herself to the child's eye level. "What is your name?" she asked. "Lintek." The Empress smiled softly. "Lintek, you honor us with your gift." She accepted the fruit, then, to Daniel's utter shock, offered it to him. "For the Reeve human," she said, her voice low enough only he could hear, "who chose my people." Daniel swallowed, touched beyond words. The small girl scampered back to her mother, who mouthed a silent thank you before disappearing into the crowd. As they resumed walking, Daniel whispered, "I didn't expect people to even know who I was." "You did not cause small change, Daniel." Her voice was quiet, weighted. "You caused upheaval, a gentle one but profound." They turned into another street, this one lined with the newly built clinics. Sleek structures of silver lattice metal and curved glass pulsed with internal light. Inside, Daniel glimpsed medics tending patients with equipment far beyond what the old wards had possessed. "It's beautiful," Daniel murmured. "It is necessary," the Empress corrected. "Beauty is only a consequence." But he noticed the way her eyes softened as she looked upon the transformations, pride tempered with something like relief. As they walked past an overlook, two Selarynth medics stood outside, whispering excitedly. "That's him," one said softly, "the human who asked for the wards." Daniel froze. The Empress turned her head sharply toward the medics. Not with anger, just acknowledgement, and the medics bowed not to her, but to Daniel. He felt breathless. When they moved on, the Empress said calmly, "You underestimate what symbols mean to people. You gave them hope. That is more valuable than technology." He glanced at her. "You gave them the changes." "And you gave me the reason," she replied. Silence drifted between them, deep, warm, laced with something fragile. Finally, Daniel said, "I keep thinking there were hundreds of ways this could have gone wrong." Her eyes flicked toward him. "It did go wrong in the beginning. You were punished." "I'd do it again," he said without hesitation. Something shifted in her expression, something quiet arrested, her steps slowed. "You would." "Yes." She stopped entirely, turning fully toward him. They stood under a canopy of glowing foliage, blue and violet leaves swaying in the evening breeze. "Even knowing it cost you your rank, your career, your future in the diplomatic corps." Daniel met her gaze. "Those things matter, but they don't define who I want to be." Her bioluminescent patterns brightened, slowly, subtly, like a dawn rising across her skin. "You speak with such conviction," she murmured, "and yet you doubt yourself so deeply." "Doesn't everyone?" he said with a slight smile. "Not rulers," she said softly. "We cannot afford to." She paused, then added, "Perhaps that is why your perspective matters. You allow room for uncertainty, for hearts to speak before strategy." Daniel stepped closer without fully realizing it. "And maybe," he whispered, "you allow room for strength where I wouldn't see it in myself." The Empress's gaze flicked downward, to his mouth, then back to his eyes, not overt. Not deliberate, but unmistakable. Her voice dropped, low and warm. "You are remarkably difficult to categorize, Daniel Reeve." He laughed gently. "I get that a lot." "I imagine," she replied, the faintest hint of amusement touching her lips. They stood in close quiet for a moment, shadows of neon drifting across them, purple across her cheek, blue across his collarbone, gold across the space between them. Then the Empress inhaled softly. "There is something more I wish to show you," she said. "Come." She led him down a winding path that ended at a wide plaza overlooking the entire city. It was empty, save for a small crystalline pedestal in its center. "This," she said, "is the Spire of Honor, a place reserved for acknowledging individuals who reshape the Dominion in ways that transcend personal reward." Daniel frowned. "Then why bring me here?" Her gaze held him. "You still do not see yourself clearly." Her voice gentled. "You never have." She lifted her hand toward the pedestal. A projected holographic sigil ignited, flowing blue light shaping into an elegant symbol. A new one not seen in the archives. A symbol reading, Reeve's Act of Restoration, Cycle 9317. Honored for compassion beyond obligation. Daniel's throat tightened. "Empress, I don't deserve." "You do," she said firmly, "and more." He turned to her, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this? Why go this far for me?" Her answer was soft, barely more than breath. Because your heart changed my empire. A pause, and because I find myself wanting to understand it. Slowly, she stepped closer, close enough that Daniel felt the radiant warmth of her skin, close enough that the night breeze shifted around them instead of between them. Her golden eyes searched his face, not as a ruler evaluating an end. Daniel woke the next morning with a sense of weightless anticipation he couldn't quite categorize. Not anxiety, not fear, something quieter, warmer, as though some part of him had already stepped into a future that hadn't yet happened. The palace attendant assigned to him, an older Selarynth named Varen, seemed to notice. "You're glowing," Varen remarked in a dry tone while laying out Daniel's formal advisor attire. "Humans don't normally glow. Is this a medical concern?" "No," Daniel said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just long day, new responsibilities, maybe too much sleep." "MMH," Varen replied, unconvinced. "I assume your meeting with the Empress today will be longer than yesterday." Daniel tried to sound casual. "Possibly." Varen gave him the exact same look his grandmother used to give him when he claimed he was just friends with a girl in school. "Ma'am," the attendant repeated before leaving the room. The Empress's high council chamber was an enormous circular hall with arched stone ribs stretching overhead like a massive skeletal cathedral. 12 counselors sat along a curved platform, each distinct in dress and bearing. Some watched Daniel with caution, others with annoyance. One counselor, Thurak, watched him with outright challenge. The Empress entered last, her presence silencing the room without a word. She took her seat at the center, her patterns bright and composed with imperial command. But beneath that, Daniel saw something subtle in her gaze when she glanced at him. A softness meant for him alone. The meeting began. Counselor Thurak was the first to strike. "Your Radiance," he said, gesturing sharply toward Daniel. "With respect, why is a human mid-rank envoy granted a seat among us? He lacks our experience, our cultural knowledge, our lineage." "Lineage," Elvira said calmly, "has not always produced wisdom." Thurak bristled. "And what has this human produced?" Silence. The Empress turned her head slowly. "Reminders." Thurak frowned. "Of what?" "That power is hollow if it abandons the people who depend on it." Several counselors shifted uneasily. Daniel didn't speak, not yet. He waited, observed, remembered what she told him the night before. Fear indicates awareness of responsibility, and so he let the fear sharpen him rather than shrink him. Thurak jabbed a finger toward the reconstruction reports. "Yes, the lower wards are improved, but at what cost? Our frontier fleets lag behind their previous strength. Territorial expansion has slowed. Our rivals watch with interest." Elvira's patterns flared gold, controlled but firm. "Let them watch," she said. "We strengthen ourselves in ways they do not understand." Thurak pressed, "And the human understands this outsider." Daniel felt her gaze flick toward him, a silent permission. He rose, and the chamber quieted. "When the Vaskari invaded," Daniel began evenly, "they targeted your empire's borders, but what weakened you wasn't fleet positioning or territorial strain." He turned toward Thurak. "It was that your people did not feel protected." Murmurs rippled. Daniel continued. "I saw the lower districts before the reconstruction. They were desperate. Their needs ignored. Neglect breaks a nation from the inside far faster than any foreign fleet." Thurak sneered. "And what would you know of governing an empire?" "Nothing," Daniel said simply. "But I know what it looks like when ordinary people lose trust in those above them. It's a pattern as old as civilization, human or Selarynth." Elvira watched him with unreadable intensity. Daniel addressed the whole council now. "You fear that rebuilding clinics and schools weakens your empire. You fear that compassion is softness, but I've seen the opposite. People fighting harder for a world they believe cares about them." He let the words settle. "Your citizens will defend this empire not because they are commanded to, but because they feel worth defending." Even Thurak hesitated. It hung in the air, simple, true, and heavy with meaning. The Empress rose. Her voice, when it came, was steady and resonant. "You asked what the human has produced." She turned toward Daniel. "He has produced clarity." Thurak bowed stiffly. Not agreement, but acceptance. The Empress dismissed the council soon after, and though many counselors had entered with doubt, most left with quiet contemplation. Only when the chamber emptied did Elvira approach Daniel. "You handled them well," she said, her tone softer now. "I tried," Daniel replied, exhaling slowly, "more than tried." She stepped closer. "You spoke with conviction and restraint and honesty." He smiled faintly. "I was terrified." "As you should be," she said. Terrified men often speak truth more clearly than comfortable ones. Daniel chuckled. Then you must think very highly of me because I'm terrified almost all the time. Her golden eyes lifted to his. I do think highly of you, Daniel Reeve. The intimacy in her voice struck him deeper than any praise. Before he could respond, she added, There is one more part of your new role. Another council, he guessed. No, her expression warmed. Something not written in law. She gestured for him to follow. She led him through a side corridor until they emerged on a balcony ringed by floating light orbs. The city stretched out below in a breathtaking expanse of shimmering blues and rising towers. This, she said quietly, is where rulers come when the burden becomes too heavy. Daniel looked at her. Then why bring me? She hesitated. It was the first time he had ever seen her hesitate. Because I no longer wish to stand here alone. Daniel's breath caught. Nothing about the moment was grand or ceremonial. It was simply her truth, unveiled, vulnerable, genuine. Slowly, he stepped beside her, resting his hands on the railing as she did. Then you don't have to, he said softly. The Empress turned her face toward him, the night glow reflecting off her patterns. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hush felt intimate, held in the curve of her breath and the closeness of their shoulders. Finally, she said, When you chose compassion over advantage, you changed more than my empire. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. What did I change? Her voice was barely above a whisper. You changed me. Heat spread through his chest, slow, astonished, undeniable. Elvira, he began. She shook her head gently. The Empress requested that Daniel meet her at dawn. Her attendant delivered the message with almost ceremonial reverence, though the wording was simple. At first light, join me in the celestial gardens. Alone. Alone, no guards. No advisors, no counsel. The weight of that word stayed with him the entire night. He barely slept, not from fear, but from a kind of slow-burning anticipation he couldn't name without feeling ridiculous. Every moment with her these past days had carried an undertone, a quiet invitation, something awakening beneath the layers of politics and protocol. But this felt different, important, final in a way. The celestial gardens lived up to their name. They sat at the very crown of the palace, a floating expanse of glass balconies, flowering bioluminescent trees, and terraces suspended over endless sky. At dawn, the entire garden glowed in hues of lavender and gold as sunlight broke across the horizon. Daniel didn't see her at first. Then she stepped from behind a drifting curtain of flowering vines, tall, regal even without armor, dressed in a soft woven mantle of deep blue that matched the rising light. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. Her skin patterns shimmered in slow waves, lighter, gentler than he'd ever seen them. A greeting, a welcome, something warmer still. You came, she said quietly. You asked, Daniel replied. I'd cross star systems for less. A faint smile touched her lips. I know. She walked toward him at an unhurried pace, not like an empress approaching a diplomat, like a woman approaching someone she'd chosen. Do you know why I summoned you? She asked. Daniel shook his head. Not exactly. Her eyes lifted to the glowing horizon. Rulers of my bloodline have stood in this garden for generations, she said, to reflect, to decide, to choose the path ahead. She paused, turning back to him. Today I make a choice that is not political, not strategic, not expected. Daniel's pulse picked up sharply. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. When you made your wish in the throne chamber, she said softly, I was unprepared. I had not considered the possibility that an outsider might see my peoples suffering more clearly than I did. She reached out a hand, slowly, almost hesitantly. I did not yet understand what your presence would become. Daniel swallowed. And now, her golden eyes locked onto his. Now I understand too well. Her fingertips brushed his wrist, a simple touch, and yet it felt like something monumental. Her bioluminescent patterns glowed brighter, blooming in a constellation of warm amber and soft gold. I have led armies, she whispered, commanded fleets, maintained an empire through war and peace. Yet nothing has unsettled me as deeply as the way you look at the world, and at me. Daniel's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something fierce and tender. I thought I came here to serve your empire, he said quietly. But I think I was meant to understand you. Her breath caught just slightly. And I, she murmured, find myself wanting someone who sees me as you do. The wind drifted between them, carrying the faint scent of glowing petals. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hand fully to Daniel's cheek. He leaned into her touch without thinking. She exhaled shakily. a sound he never imagined an Empress could make. "Daniel Reeve," she said, voice trembling at the edges. "I do not offer my trust easily, or my heart, it is not our way." His hand rose to her waist, tentative but sincere. "I'm not asking for what you cannot give." Her voice softened. "You asked for nothing, and that is why I choose to give you something." She stepped close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. "In Selarynth culture," she murmured, "there is a tradition. When a ruler finds someone who alters her understanding of strength, someone who challenges and steadies her in equal measure, she offers them a vow of shared insight." "A vow," Daniel whispered. "Yes." Her eyes softened. "Not romance. Not duty, something deeper. A bond of perspectives, hearts learning together." He felt his pulse stutter. "And you want that with me?" he asked. Her fingers slid down to take his hand completely. "I do," she said simply, no grandeur. "No ceremony, just truth." Daniel tightened his hold gently. "Then I accept." The Empress closed her eyes, exhaling in relief and something like joy. When she opened them again, her patterns glowed bright and warm, alive with emotion. She leaned her forehead to his, a silent vow, a quiet beginning, a closeness forged not from power but from choices. When she finally pulled back, there was a softness in her expression reserved for him alone. "Come," she said. "There is one more place I wish to show you." She led him to the garden's edge, where a towering crystalline monument stood, newly carved. Daniel froze as he recognized the etched inscription. "The Reeve Principle. Power is hollow if it abandons the hearts it claims to protect. Statement of Envoy Daniel Reeve, Earth, Cycle 9317. At the bottom, by decree of Empress Elvira Keith, this principle shall guide the Dominion in all future eras." Daniel stared at it, stunned. "You built policy around my words." Her voice warmed. "I built it around your understanding." His throat tightened so deeply he couldn't speak. The Empress stepped closer once more. "Walk with me," she said softly. "From this day forward, not as ruler and envoy, but as two who shape a future together." Daniel nodded. "I would like that," he whispered. The Empress smiled, soft, radiant, unguarded. "Good," she said. "Then our story begins."